Hello all you lovely people and welcome back. So today what we're going to be looking at by super popular request by my Patreon supporters is how to create a basic menu system for your game. Now there's a lot of different interpretations for what menu might mean, so what I'm going to give you is kind of a really basic, like, bare bones structure for a menu system like you can see on the screen here, where you can select different options and make them do different things, and hopefully you'll be able to take that basis and use the logic to kind of inform whatever kind of menu, or whether it's an options menu or like a main title screen menu or something like that, that you need to make. So it's going to end up looking something like this that we've got here, with start, continue, level select, options, quit, and like make it so that when you select quit, it quits, and when you select start, it'll just move you to another room, and then hopefully from there you'll be able to build on it and create whatever other stuff you need to make. So just to reiterate, what this is going to be teaching is the foundations of building a menu, and then you will need to basically have a decent enough understanding of GameMaker and GML in general to be able to then make that menu do more complex things or take it in different directions. But all the basics are here, and you'll understand how to do the basic things like quit or change a room or change a variable around and do all these other things. So let's get in there. Okay, so now I've shown you what we're going to build. I've gone ahead and melted down kind of the project to just all the basic stuff that we need. I've got rid of all the code so we can rewrite it again. So right, all we have in the project now is sprite spr_arrow. That's the arrow we're going to be using to just sort of, as a cursor to show which option on the menu we're selecting. A font just to use to draw the text of our options. Obviously there's the option of drawing like a sprite or something, or like a background or something like that to represent the different menu options and like doing it in a fancy animated way. We're just going to go with the basics and just use a font, and we're just going to draw different strings for the names of our different menu options. So for that we need a font, and this is just an Arial font set to like size 24. I built two rooms just so that we can demonstrate like moving between rooms, and in order to show it's working I've just changed the background color of each one just so that you know when we're in one room or the other. Just room 0 and room 1. So the first thing we're going to do is create an object, and this object is what we're going to use to manage the menu. And we're just going to call it obj_menu, as always, the same kind of naming conventions and stuff that we always use. So the first thing what we need in here is going to be the create event, as per usual. Drag in our standard execute code action over here, and the first thing we want to do is establish the names of our menu options. Now you don't necessarily need to do this if you're using sprites or something like that to show like the different options you want to select, but because we're using a font we're going to establish the strings of our different menu options, and we're going to do that just by creating a really simple array. The array is going to be called menu. Now to make an array, if I've not explained this before, I may do another video explaining in detail about all these different kinds of variable types, but just a quick crash course. An array means that like you can have a variable that contains like a variable that acts as a list of other variables. So we would have here menu square bracket 0 close square bracket, and I'm going to set that to equal start, like that string. So menu number 0 equals start, and now like what that means compared to a different variable, like where we would normally say like a menu equals start, is that instead of just being one variable, we've created an array or a list of other variables. So, and the 0th entry, or otherwise known as basically the first entry, because it starts at 0, is going to be the string start, and our next entry is going to be menu square bracket 1, and it's going to be continue, and you see we're just going to list all the different options that we want to show. So menu number 2 is going to equal level select. A bunch of these, we won't actually make most of these options do anything other than start and quit, but they're just there to show example. Menu 3 is going to equal options, and this is basically the system I used in my game Another Perspective too, with different twists on it, and even the options where you can like change options in the like languages and stuff like that is all built using a system based on this logic. So menu4 is going to equal quit. Now, a couple of other length variables that we'll need just to kind of make everything work is I'm going to have the variable space equals 64. Now, I'm going to use that variable just to decide how much like vertical space there is between each like menu item, just for the sake of drawing it. It's kind of really arbitrary and depends exactly how you want it to look. So it's not really that important of a variable, but for now we're going to set that one to 64 and you'll see how it's used later. The other really important one to declare is going to be mpos equals 0, or not that is going to stand for is menu position, essentially is what I mean by that. And at menu position 0, we're going to be means our cursor essentially is going to be over menu option 0, which is start, and when it's 1, it'll be over continue, and so on and so forth. That represents where our cursor is, basically. And you might now in your head be able to work out how we're using the space variable in tandem with this to say, like, oh, place the coordinate at y, mpos multiplied by space in order to like go down, down, down. That might be a bit too complicated, but you can kind of see how maybe that would get to work later. So that's all we need in the create event. So now we're going to go ahead and add the step event. So go ahead, as always, and drag in the execute code action, bringing up our wonderful code editor. And what we're going to do here, first of all, is I'm going to say var move equals 0. What we're going to write at this first bit of code is we're just going to create code that says allows us to move up and down the menu, basically. Just to move the mouse cursor around. So all of this is very simple stuff that if you followed earlier tutorials, you'll kind of get what I'm doing. So I'm going to say move minus equals, although it does take a slightly different approach. And what I'm going to say here, and I'm really only doing this to demonstrate a concept, like you wouldn't have to do this way, but max bracket keyboard check pressed VK up, and then after you've written that, put a comma and say keyboard check pressed ord bracket W comma 0 bracket. Now that might seem a little confusing if I'm sure I've explained what max means before, but what max as a function does is it's going to take the biggest value out of the values it's given, and we've given it 3 values. We've given it keyboard underscore check underscore pressed VK up, and we've given it the same for the W key and 0. So you can imagine that if we're pressing either one of these, if we're pressing up, then this returns 1, and if we're pressing W, then this returns 1. So if we're not doing either of those, both of those things are going to return 0. So basically, move is going to be subtracted by either 0 or 1 if we're pressing one of these keys. And the reason we're subtracting from move when we're pressing up is because we could do it either way, but it's convenient because, as we know, y coordinate increases when you go down and decreases when you go up. So if we're pressing up, we're going to subtract from move, just makes it easier for us to move things around later. And then we're going to do the same thing in the other direction, so move plus equals max keyboard underscore check underscore pressed VK underscore down, comma, keyboard underscore check underscore pressed ord bracket S bracket 0. So the same thing again, either 1 or 0, either 1 or 0, or 0, and just going to return the biggest, so So if, now that we've, just, because all we've done is set a variable there, so now we actually need to, like, do something with that. So I'm going to say if move, and because it's declared with var up there at the start of every single frame, move is 0, and that's going to be either 1 or -1, or still 0, depending on whether or not we pressed anything. So assuming that it's not 0, meaning we do actually want to move somewhere, now what we want to do is say mpos, which, as you remember, is our variable keeping track of the actual position of our cursor, is going to be plus equaled by move. So we're going to add either 1 or -1 to our menu position. So if now, as a result of that, we want to make sure we can't go over the top or under the bottom of our menu, and we're just going to make it wrap around if we do. So if we go off the bottom, we'll come back on the top, and if we go off the top, we'll come back on the bottom. So if mpos is less than 0, mpos equals array length underscore 1d underscore menu minus 1. Now, array underscore length underscore 1d is going to return the number of items in a one-dimensional array. A one-dimensional array being the thing that we made in the create event. This is a one-dimensional array because it only has one number at the end. You can do, it's beyond the scope of this tutorial, but you can do two-dimensional arrays where you have like a list of a list, if you know what I mean. So like you could have 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, and so on and so forth. But ours is one-dimensional. It's just a list of variables, and as you can see, there are 5 items in it, but as it starts with 0, and we want to represent our menu position including 0, so our length that we want to return is the length of that array minus 1, as opposed to just being 5, because we don't want to know about from position 1 to 5, because that's like from 1 to a position that we don't know anything about. So we want it from 0 to 4. Makes sense. So back into the step event now. So yeah, if it's less than 0, which means we've gone over the top, then set it to our array length minus 1, which as we know is 4. So if we were to go to minus 1, which would be off the top of the menu, go to position 4, which would be right at the bottom of the menu. The reason we use that logic there is so that we can change the length of the menu at any time, because sure, we could just put 4 in there, but like that would mean we were stuck with that, and we would have to keep modifying that every time we change the length of the menu, and this gives us a bit more freedom. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit now, so let me carry on with this. If mpos, and we just do the same for the other direction, pos greater than array underscore length 1d menu minus 1 close bracket mpos equals 0. So the same again, if our menu position is greater than 4, which is what that is, so greater than the total length of our menu, if we've gone off the bottom, so our menu position wants to go to 5, then just set it back to 0. And we can just set that to 0, because 0 is always going to be the first entry. So that's that, and now we have this variable that is always keeping track of where we are. Well, I mean, we're not drawing the arrow on there yet, but we already know which option we have selected, even if it's not visually represented yet. So now we need to work out whether or not we've pushed like the enter key or anything like that, and if we have, then do something as a result. So I'm going to say var push for if we've pushed the button. Push equals max, and we're going to use the same method again. The reason I'm using this max method for doing the keys and stuff is just to show you one way in which you could take multiple inputs for one thing very easily. Like the idea here being you can use the arrow keys and WSAD. Like I get a lot of people asking me a lot of the time, like, oh, how can I do WSAD instead of the arrow keys? And I think it's very valuable a lot of the time if you want to use WSAD to do arrow keys as well, just as a usability thing. That's up to you, obviously, but this is just one way in which you can, like, take multiple inputs for one thing. So here we're going to take, like, shift, enter, and spacebar, like, all at the same time, and you can see how that works. If I do max keyboard underscore check underscore released, vk underscore enter, keyboard underscore check underscore released, vk underscore shift, keyboard underscore check underscore released, vk space, and comma 0 bracket semicolon. Have I written this wrongly? I think I need another. I missed out a bracket. Shift there. So as you can see, it's going to return the biggest, whichever value is the biggest between 0 and all of these functions. So, yeah. So with that in mind, if push equals 1, which means we've pushed a button, str underscore menu, close bracket, open bracket, close bracket. Now you may be wondering, str underscore menu, now that's not even like turned yellow, what does that even do? Basically we're going to call a script. If we've pressed the button, then we're going to call a script that decides what to do with that option. I'm really only doing it like that just to kind of space things out, kind of help explain a bit what scripts can be used for, and so on and so forth. We could just write it all in here and write a big case statement, but I'm going to do it in a script just so it's a bit cleaner and you can kind of like see and understand things a little bit easier. So that's going to be red for a while. It's going to think there's an error there, but in fact, just to make sure that goes away, I'm going to go to script and go create script and call this str underscore menu like that, and you can put any amount of code in here. I'll just write placeholder as a comment like that. I'm just going to click tick. You can see the script is there now, str underscore menu, and if I go back into the step event now, you can see how this is now turned yellow because it recognizes it, and it basically just treats it like a command. So it's going to do all of the stuff in that script when we call str underscore menu. We put brackets there because you can also pass through variables to it, and you can reference those in the script later, but we don't actually need to do any of that. So, now that that's done, well actually now that that's done, we should probably fill out the script itself. So, this script, all we're going to do in the script is basically just write a switch statement that decides what to do based on what our menu position currently is. It's really simple as that. So I'm going to say switch and pause, open bracket and close bracket. I don't know if I've explained switches before, but basically all this does is going to take this variable and we're going to write a number of case statements. The first one being case 0. And what that means is it's basically like, it's like a combination, like multiple if statements in one, in a way. So in the case that npos is 0, do this stuff. And then you write break afterwards to basically tell GameMaker that you're done. If you don't do that, then it'll do, if it's 0, do all of this stuff. And then if it happens to be like, if one of the other cases is also true, it will keep doing it. Whereas if you put break in here, the first one comes to that's true, it'll do by itself. So the other thing there is after case 0 is we're going to open and close curly braces like that, just to keep it contained so that we know where everything is. And in here I'm going to say room underscore go to underscore next, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon, and then put break here to say that that's the end of this case. And then I'm going to do this, basically the same thing for all the others. Case 1, I think that was like continue or something like that, but I'm just going to put break in here because it's just really an example one. We don't actually want it to do anything here. 2, and the same for 2. I'm just going to actually copy and paste that a couple of times and change that 2 to that 3 and that 1 to not 5 to 4. Just going to close that down just so you can see how you can also do this in one line. So menu option 4 was quit, so I'm going to, in here I'm just going to put game underscore end, bracket, close bracket, semicolon, and then break all on one line, and that actually works in the same way. Like, I could do the same thing with that, but to do that gives you more space in case you want to do more complex things. Our quit option is going to be really simple, so it's just going to quit the game. And then also important generally is to include a default option in your switch statement, which means basically if none of the cases are true, it'll do this. It'll do whatever you put into default. Don't actually want it to do anything here, so I mean it's kind of redundant because otherwise, you know, if you didn't write a default, it just wouldn't do anything. But you know, I'm just writing it here so you understand how default is used and what it does. But I'm just going to say break so that it does nothing. So there's nothing there; it just instantly breaks. End of that case. But that's the case that will be carried out, and you can put stuff there if you want something to happen. If someone like pressed the button and none of the options were true or whatever in whatever switch statement. Obviously that wouldn't happen in this specific circumstance, but you know, it's kind of like a safety check type thing. So yeah, that's our script that decides what to do with whatever menu option we have selected, and whenever you want to, like, I don't know, if you were in like options and you were changing languages or something like that, like I did in another perspective, in here I might say like, or before the break even, global dot language equal 2 or plus equal 1, or you know, something like that, and you can start to understand how you can use this to use options and stuff like that in different menus. So yeah, that's the script, simple as that. I click tick there now. Now all we need to do is add the draw event. So go ahead, drag in the good old execute code action here. So now the draw event, all we're going to do now, because we've got all this stuff like handling the menu and everything fine logically, like we've handled like moving around this menu or whatever, but visually you don't actually see anything, like it's all just happening in code. So we now need to actually draw a menu on the screen so that the user actually can see themselves interacting with the menu, because otherwise at the moment they're kind of interacting with an invisible menu. It's working, but it's like it's not actually visible to the player in any way. Now how exactly you do this will depend on what the hell you're making, whatever game you're doing, but I'm just going to show you how to create exactly what I had at the start of this video. So I'm going to say draw underscore set underscore h_line fade underscore left. There's not too much point in me explaining all of this stuff because it's going to vary depending on what you want to do. Fade underscore middle. But it's all the sort of standard, like, just setting up the drawing alignments so we can write text in specific places. Font, fnt underscore options, so set our font up, set vertical align to middle, and horizontal alignment to left. Just like the same as how you would use options in like a word processor. Set color, c underscore white, so we've got some white text. And I'm going to say var m semicolon for m equals 0, m less than array length. I'll kind of explain this in a second. 1d menu m plus equals 1. So initializing this temporary variable m as 0, and while m is less than the length of well, assuming this condition is true, so m at the moment it's 0 is less than the length of our menu array, which as we know is 5. And so while it's less than 5, which means, you know, once it gets above 5, once it gets to 5 it stops, whereas at 4, which is our last, you know, meaningful entry number, it'll carry on. While that remains true, n plus equals 1. So basically all we're doing is in this for loop we're going to do a bunch of stuff assuming m is 0, then m is 1, then m is 2, then m is 3, then m is 4. Basically, yeah, just going to repeat whatever's in here 4 times, with m increasing each time. That's how this works. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong line, okay. Draw underscore text, x plus space, y plus m multiplied by space. As you can remember, we set space to be 64 in our create event, and this is what we're using it for. String menu n. Now this is one of the more useful things about arrays. So now we can refer to a specific entry in the array by using a variable to indicate which one of that list of variables we're talking about. And that's the point of like doing an array, as opposed to me just making 5 completely different variables called like menu 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. We use this list so we can refer to a specific item in that list by using a variable to decide which one of the list items we want to refer to. So in order, meaning that in order we're drawing those strings that we saw in the create event, these start, continue, level, select options, and quit. We're drawing those one by one from 0 to 4 in a specific position, x, starting with the x and y coordinates, so based on wherever we happen to place this object in the room. and then we use like X plus space, so we give it like 64 pixels away from wherever the object is placed, just so that we have room to place our arrow cursor that we're going to use. And our Y coordinate is going to be the menu item multiplied by space, so that we get them like 64 pixels, and then 64 pixels down, then 128, then 196, and so on and so forth, like continually adding 64, so that they're all drawn below one another. And that's everything we need there. And then all we need to do, now we've drawn our menu options, is just draw the arrow in the right place. And so we can use our mpos variable to decide where we're going to draw this. Draw a sprite. Sprite index will just set the sprite of this object to be the arrow. Oh, but I could just write _arrow there as well. 0. This just makes it easier to change that without actually having to change any code. Yeah, subimage, sorry, 0, so it only has one frame anyway. But x plus equal 16, y, not plus equal, just plus 16, sorry, y plus space in there, y plus mpos, so menu position multiplied by space. And that'll draw our arrow in the right spot, depending which menu option we have currently selected. And that hopefully should be all there is to it. Set that to SBR_arrow. We don't have to worry about it just drawing the arrow on the spot, because we have a draw event without like a draw self in it, so that sprite's not going to show up by itself. I'm going to plonk that menu object in here, run the game, hope I haven't done anything wrongly. Yeah, error. Variable get -1, meaning the object itself. Mov is the variable it's not finding. Okay, I can see what's happened here. So for object menu. So abort, go into object menu step, it said line 5. So this is a good lesson in debugging here, really. It said line 5, it was trying to reference this variable and didn't know what it was. That was what that error was representing there. And as you can see, and this happens to the best of us, all I've done is I've just written this variable wrong. I was trying to refer to move, and I wrote mov instead, so E. There we go. Now, hopefully... And this time, okay, it seems to have worked. So now, as you can see, we have this menu. I can move the arrow keys around, up and down, like that, and if I select start, you say it takes us to the next room, just like that, which is the thing we put in the script. It won't do anything on the other options because we didn't set it to. But if I move down to quit, and I select quit, it'll quit. So yeah, that's how you make a really bare basic menu object for your game that can handle just like moving up and down and around a menu and changing options and stuff. And hopefully you can see from that logic how you could do something more complex and more fitting to whatever your specific project is. I don't know if I will do more on this subject specifically, because I feel like it's all just going to be stuff that kind of spins off from here. There are other ways and different ways of doing this. If I find one that I think would be a specific interest that's different enough from this, then maybe I'll cover that. But otherwise, I think this should be good enough as a foundation for you guys to get building whatever kinds of menus or whatever it is you want to put in your game. There's all sorts of interesting things to think about, like how you might do it with, like, decide what the mouse is over or whatever, but then you should probably, if you understood this tutorial properly, you should probably know how to do that as well. And so on. So yeah, have a play around with that, see what you can make, and I hope you found that useful, and I will catch you guys next time. Thanks guys, thanks for listening.